real quick in the chat room, how many folks was it Podcast Movement and attended my session that's online right now? Were any of you there? If you were, say yes, I was there in the chat room. Or how many of you were here last year from my presentation? And I'll just kind of watch the chat room as it is. And what I did last year was talking about how to grow your show, and I revised that presentation and did an act 2 at Podcast Movement. So the Podcast Movement session was packed, gill to gill. There was people sitting on top of one another. Matter of fact, it was about as hot in that room as it is in my studio right now. It's about 100 here in Hawaii, and the trade winds are barely going. But so for some of you, this may be a repeat if you were there last year and saw this, or if you were at Podcast Movement. But I wanted to be able to share this with the folks in mass and kind of give you guys my formula on building a show. And I think that having been in this space, well, I guess let me just go load the presentation, and the rest of it will speak for itself. I gotta shut that off. There we go. So let me flip this over, and I don't want to PowerPoint you to death, but this is the best way for me to put this out. And really, what I want you to think about here is the focus of building your show and your community. This growth focus is something that we've had some challenges as podcasters getting our arms around, and they truly feel, based on what I've seen over the past 14 years and the way I've done some things, that I have a pretty good track record here on building a pretty big show. Now, let me mention that little did I know, back in July, I got put in the penalty box by Google for page load speeds. I talked a little bit about this morning if you were on with Mike and I, and I'm crawling out of that penalty box. And I won't go in too much detail, but if you have your own website, pay attention to page speed loads, image sizes, that kind of stuff. I'm not covering it in this session, but I just spent a week learning more than I cared to about some things that Google are doing in relation to page speed loads on websites. Now, that's completely separate from this conversation that I'm about ready to put forth to you. But even I, at 14 years, took a hit. And it'll probably take me 3 to 6 weeks to climb back out of it. And because of that, my Google traffic is down. So let's talk more about that as we get into this. But first things first is that, and let's see if I can flip this the right way. In fact, I need to have the mouse on the right screen. I started podcasting in October 2004. I'm just about a week away, or 5 days away, from my 14th anniversary. I think my actual start date was October 4th or October 5th. My show was picked up by GoDaddy, sponsored in actually June of 2005. The first check I got was July of 2005. And something got messed up here. There's like 1,800 audio episodes, not 18. 1,000 video episodes that I've done. And I've done collectively with a group of people, over 1,300 trade show interviews. Now, why is that important? It's going to play into some of the stuff that we talked about today. And if you haven't subscribed already, I'm at newmediashow.com. I'm on powerpresspodcast.com, and my tech shows at geeknewscentral.com. But more importantly, the question I want you to ask yourself tonight as you're watching this, and this is very, very important. Do you want to grow your show? Because if you do, the value of the information I'm giving you here. Now, I don't like to brag about earnings, but a few years ago, I decided I had to talk about earnings because it shows what you put into it, you get out of it. And I think it's super critical here for all of us to realize that there is potential to make money in this space, but you have to grind. Here in Hawaii, we have this, and when we go out and eat and we have some good food, we call it eating some grinds, or grinding, grinding some good food. When you want podcast and build a big audience, you have to do the grind. And so from that, my show's earned, at this point, close to $3 million over just about 14 years, 700 plus PR contacts that I know by name, and over 1,000 direct corporate contacts at the C level. not at the worker level or I shouldn't say that. At the C level, meaning there's someone, CIO, CEO, CFO, CTO, someone I know in a corporate organizations. As a matter of fact, one of the corporations that I talk about a lot is the folks that make this thing called the GoPro. And I'm first name basis with the GoPro CEO, and it's over the years of working with that team and what I do with my show. So, do you, or in the statement you want to ask is, do you really want your show to grow? And I think all of us say yes to that. And again, are you willing to put in the grind? Are you willing to put in the time? And what I want to do today is if you walk away from anything, the goal of this time together is about building exposure for your show, building authority for you as a content creator, and building engagement for your audience. This, I feel, is truly the goal. If you can build exposure for your show while building authority for yourself, most of us started this. We started as let's just say it, a nobody. I started my podcast 14 years ago. I was active duty in the United States Navy working on airplanes. I had a tech blog, but I wasn't a great tech blogger. Matter of fact, I sucked. And this podcasting thing came around and gave me the opportunity to speak and do this thing. Never knew it was going to change into this. So no one knew me on the scene. No one knew me on the scene. And today I get invites to go to trade shows. I do public speaking. I go to corporations. I do boot camps. It's all because I build exposure, I build authority, and I built engagement of my audience. So with that said, wrong way, Todd. You must become the subject matter expert of your content category. When the phone rings and it's BBC or CNN or Fox or the newspaper or whoever it is, they're calling you because you're that lady or that man that is the person that's a subject matter expert of your content category. This is how you own and build exposure and build authority. You have to become the subject matter expert. Can't say that enough. If you do this, everything else will come. And again, to do this, you build exposure and authority. Okay, so those of you that sat through one of these before, you've seen these before. And again, I redid this presentation. I'm going deeper into what my formula is. But number one, if you're not blogging, sorry, you need to. If you think it's old fashioned, sorry, that doesn't cut it anymore. Google is God in delivering traffic to our websites. You have to blog. You got to create content on non-podcast days. Of course, you got to do the podcast. Easy to do a book. These days, ebook is simple. I was fortunate when I did my book on podcasting. I had a technical editor. I had someone that helped me with my commas, and believe me, I was not. If you see my high school grades for education, for English, or even my college transcripts for English, I suck when it comes to writing. So if I can write a book, anybody can write a book, because there's great people out there and there's great tools to help you with editing and getting the grammar right. So there's a book in everyone. There's trade shows and events that you can go to for your show. There's radio appearances, TV appearances. There's speaking nationally, and there's connecting with companies. I'm going to get into each of these in a deeper sense. Again, is there value in blogging? I say there is. Even though I'm currently in the penalty box from Google because my page speeds were loading too slow, I'll climb out of that and I'll be better than what I was. So I'm not getting as much traffic. I'm not getting 40,000 hits a day to the website from Google, but I'm still getting 20,000 because there's 15 to 16,000 articles on my website. Again, most podcasters today think there's no value in blogging. They say, I don't need to do that. I'm just doing a show. And if you're doing a show on someone else's platform and not your own .com, you might as well not blog. If your show is sitting on someone else's platform and not something that you own, you're wasting your time, because why do you want to build something for someone else? You should be building authority on what you have and what you own and where you put your content down. That's why people come to geeknewscentral.com, newmediashow.com. That's my home base. No one cares where you host your podcast. It doesn't matter. It's where you have your enterprise. But again, it's a short-sighted thinking in an instant gratification society, and that's what we're in right now. And we all know that podcasting is not a sprint; it's a marathon. All right. And again, a Google goldmine: 16,445 blog posts, 3,200 podcast interviews. That turns into the traffic from 2003. I started with like 330 referrals a day from Google. That was before I started podcasting. In 2007, it had grown to 11,000. 2012, it grew to 40,000. 2018, up until July 1st, 40 to 210,000. And then what what Google giveth, Google taketh away. And so now it's 20,000 a day. Don't you think that hurt me in bringing in new audience members to my show? Because when I'm having 40 to 210,000 new listeners coming in, or 40 to 210,000 people coming to my website every day, a small percentage of those subscribe to the podcast. And that small number that subscribed to the podcast heard my advertising from GoDaddy and reacted to that. So in turn, because my numbers are down, my sponsorship earnings are down. I'm real world case on this. So this inbound traffic to you will result in more listeners. It's a numbers game, folks. It truly, truly is. The average on page time, if you go look at your Google Analytics, in 2003, people were hanging on my website for about 3 seconds, meaning they were coming and they were leaving, all the way up to 2018, where they're coming for 23 minutes. It's huge. It's a huge number. Staying power. It's like coming to Facebook and hanging out for 20 minutes. That's what they do when they come to my website. They consume some content, they watch a video, they read an article. So they stay about 23 minutes. That's big. And keeping them on my brand, listening to me, listening to my writers. At the same time, when the people are coming to your website, there's an opportunity. Do you make it easy for them to subscribe to your show? So many podcasters say it kills me. I mean, I literally smash my head against the wall when I go to their website and all I see is subscribe to Apple Podcasts and some little small icon. I don't care how listeners listen to my show. I give them every opportunity to subscribe, whether it be Apple Podcasts, on Android, by email, Google Podcasts, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Spotify, or the old school RSS feed. I don't care. It's at the top of every sidebar on my website. If you don't have a Google Podcast link on your website right now, I'm just going to say, good. That means there's going to be more subscribers for me because you don't have it. Cold turkey time here a little bit. Go look at your websites. When people land on your homepage, can they subscribe right now? Instantly. If they can, good. You've been listening. You're doing the right things. If they go to your homepage and they can't subscribe to your show immediately, you have failed. Because if you look at your bounce rates, you only look at your Google Analytics, how long do they stay in your page? Are you at that 3, 5, 6 second mark for them hanging on your homepage? Everyone says there is a discovery problem in podcasting. There is not a discovery problem. There's a podcaster problem in podcasting and not putting ability for people to subscribe to their show on their websites. If you don't have an Android link or a Google Podcast link on your website, you are immediately turning away 50% of your listeners. They are walking because they have no idea how to get to your show. This is on 16,000 plus pages of my website. So I'm being a little rough tonight, and I want you all to think about all this. And more importantly, this is for the people that aren't watching actively. This is people that are watching this 3 months from now on the International Podcast Day YouTube website. You know, my goal here is I'm trying to punch you guys in the face a little bit, right? If you guys ever listen to No Agenda podcast, it's one of my most favorite podcasts. Part of their formula is you punch people in the mouth. You want to wake them up and listen. So what I'm trying to do tonight is punch you guys in the mouth a little bit and wake you up. So Todd, simple rule of thumb, take no break for first 2 years of podcasting. No break. No break. Podcast frequency, 1 to 2 episodes weekly minimum. I've got proof, years and years and years of proof that if you're not podcasting on a weekly basis, the shows that are going to grow twice as fast as you do. Here's a simple fact, listeners, and this is the most important thing you have to think about when you're doing your show on a consistency basis. Listeners are building you into their lives. Don't leave them hanging. If you miss an episode, your inbox should be full from your listener saying, where were you? Are you alive? Did you get hit by a car? Are you in the hospital? And that's how they should depend upon your show coming out. Seasons? Don't even get me started on seasons. There's no such thing as seasons in podcasting. If you end a show on Friday, season 2 starts on Monday. If you decide to do season, great. A lot of people advocate for it. Good luck recovering the audience that you lose to me or someone else that's doing a weekly show while you're taking time off. Here's the best thing, folks. This is Todd's philosophy. You can take what you want from this. There are no rules in podcasting. So just remember that. You can smile as I'm going through this. You can take what I say with a grain of salt. But we'll go back to those earlier slides. My formula here has put nearly $3 million in my pocket over the past 14 years. It didn't put $1 million a year. A lot of people don't know this. I take no salary from Raw Voice. My show pays me. I'm in the field. I'm here down in the grind doing this so I can sit here and tell you what is possible, how it can be done. Now, that's probably going to change here in the near future from a salary standpoint. But up to this point, my show has sustained my family and me in Hawaii, kept the lights on, kept the insurance paid, kept the car full of gas, food on the table, and the mortgage paid. Is that worth it to you to do these things? So finding your voice as you're starting your podcast is going to take time. Perfecting your show is going to take time. Episode 1 is not going to sound the same as episode 50, and 50 is not going to sound the same as 200, and 200 is not going to sound the same as 1322, which I put in the can a few days ago. Let's talk about writing a book. I didn't think writing a book would be even possible. I got an email from a company that says, hey, we want to write a book on podcasting. And my response to them, and I'm going to be very frank here, I'm going to tell you exactly what I told the book writer, Wiley Publishing, little book publishing house. I had no idea who they were. I said, my exact response to them in email was, you've got to be shitting me. That was my exact email response. Their response back was, no, we're not shitting you. We want you to write a book. Look us up online. And I did. I was like, oh. According to Joseph Epstein, 81% of Americans feel they should have a book in them and should write it. Do you? Are you the subject matter expert in your category? Would a book help you advance that? Your book source materials in front of you already. Your interviews, your content, your experience. You can write a book. It just starts with an outline. It's simple. Everyone should do this. And the next year, make it a goal to put out your own book, even if it's an ebook, even if it's 40 pages. Because then you can say, yeah, I'm a published author. Even if it's self-published, who cares? That's what everybody does today. Trade shows, special events, not all of you have a trade show associated with your content, but most of you do. This, for me, is where I really learned that my audience was pretty diverse, and I could bring them content that was out of my normal twice weekly tech news content. It's a supplementary content gold mine. And I don't put it in my regular podcast feed. I create a brand new feed. And I go to a trade show. I do interviews, video, and talk to people, the companies that have got cool stuff, talking about GoPro. I was one of 5 people that interviewed the CEO of GoPro the first year they were at the Consumer Electronics Show. One of 5. They gave that company some airtime. What do you think? How appreciative do you think that company is now, all these years later? And it turns out that this content that we put out every year, when we go to these trade shows, generates a whole new base of people that may not have never listened to Geek News Central, but they say, wow, this guy's talking to these folks that have this wine decanter. I wonder what else he talks about. Let me subscribe to his podcast. We've done stuff with MSNBC. We've done Fox. We've done live sets for BBC. It goes on and on and on. It opens all kinds of relationships, vendor relationships, insider access, advisory boards, media, and it really trains you on how to handle media, and it turns that into podcast sponsorships. These relationships you get at these shows, then the person likes you, they have their product, they're getting ready to come to market. It's pretty simple. What we do is we book appointments prior to the show. We roam the show floor. We do interviews. When we do an interview, we give them a reverse press kit saying, here, who I am. This is what the story is. If you want to add free version of this interview, there's an opportunity in there. Then we have a posting strategy where we do SEO, do vendor follow-up vendor interview, and then turn that into sponsorships. And rinse and repeat every year. Interviews are short, 10 minutes. Who, what, where. Talk about this ad, or this reverse press kit has who we are, what and where you get the content. Again, the ad-free opportunity. There's a business card in there, and I give them this reverse press kit in the most obnoxious colored envelope I can find, whether it be orange, blue, pink. I think last year I had aqua was the color, and it's something that they don't throw in the trash can. They see that and go, oh, yeah, I remember. It's not just some white envelope. And if they do throw it in the trash can, then I follow up with them again. Let's talk about the posting strategy. I have professional writers. We take time after the event to put the content out. We have a schedule. We release 2, 3, 4 videos a day at the max. We talk to the vendors prior to the videos coming out. And again, push the ad-free opportunity. Hang on one second. Hey, stop. So let's talk about ego. The person that you're interviewing or have interviewed, CEOs, got big heads. Big. You look what happened to the Tesla CEO. Just got hit for $20 million fine. The SEC has to step down from the chairman of his company because he tweeted something that he thought he could get away with. And he has an ego, cost him $20 million, and he no longer can be the boss of that enterprise. So because they have this ego, you use that to your advantage. You tell their PR company or their marketing firm, hey, his video is about ready to go up, or you email him directly. Chris, please. My son's emptying the dishwasher in the background. I apologize. So anyway, you work with their PR firm, work with their marketing department. Of course, he's going to want that video linked, and that video is going to get linked back to your website, build you Google traffic. I can't state enough this right here, this ego thing. You walk away from the interview, you got his card, right? He wants to see his video up online. You feed that ego with everything you can. And you make the marketing departments mad at those companies for having to put your video on their webpage because the CEO said, do it. So again, vendor follow-up, the process there, we do a 30, 60, 90-day follow-up. We let them know how many total views and downloads they had. We forward them the listener comments, and then we schedule the follow-up interview. And then again, the sponsorship. This is too much to go into during what we have time today for, but if you want to talk to me about sponsorship strategies, happy to provide that. You can email me, todd@blubrry.com, but it's not complicated. You've made all this inroads. You've got this contact with the company. It's a very simple process to start the sponsorship discussion going, and going direct to the boss. Again, that ego involved. Say, hey, John Smith, here's my media package. We had a great result because of your interview. Hey, why don't we run a sponsored campaign in the show for whatever product or, whatever you can do to turn that on. Okay. So again, we've been talking about blogging, podcast, book, trade shows. We'll move to the next category here. I'm going to talk about radio, TV. PR firms, when you get contacted by a PR firm, whether you went to a trade show or not, in my opinion, and if there's PR people listening, they are the enemy for a content creator. Their job is to shield the client, provide limited access. They rarely give you more than you get. But if you have no way through the PR firm to get to a client, you can do a collaboration with them where they get 15% of the take. Now, PR firms, they're not advertising companies, but if you go to them with an advertising deal or with a sponsorship deal, and you tell them just tell them up front, you help me make this happen, I'll give you 15%. There's an unwritten rule in the PR industry. That's what they charge anyway. So you're going to give up 15 points, then then it's in their financial interest to forward your sponsorship package through them to the company and advocate for them. You think if I'm the company and I'm paying that company $100,000 to do PR for my company, I would assume, because I'm paying them, that they're going to bring opportunities to me. No. The PR firm wants their $100,000 while still promoting them, but making sure that their budget is not impacted because he's going to do an advertising deal with me. So that 15% is sometimes incentive enough to make them do the pass-through if you don't have a direct connection. And when you go to trade shows and go to events or go to any type of problem, and the person hands you okay, let's say you're going to do an interview with someone and they hand you a card and you look at it, and usually the cards will be two-sided. On the front side will be the PR firms, and on the back, maybe the company they're repping, or vice versa. And I'll always ask them, are you PR within the company, or are you an external firm? If they're an external firm, I will move heaven and earth to try to get a business card from the person I'm interviewing, but they will often never, the guy that's interviewing may not have a business card, because again, the PR firm says, no, don't bring any business cards. We will take care of the interaction between you and the client. They're shielding, right? So the PR firms have drove me absolutely insane over about the past 5 years. They didn't used to have this strategy, but because there's so many bloggers, there's so many podcasters, there's so many people that are out there trying to get through them, they put up the firewall. So this vehicle for collaboration with 15% is going to help you get through that. And I know there's questions that are building up, and I'll answer those before we get done here. But this PR firms, they've almost made me sometimes quit going to some events and do different strategies. I work with smaller companies now. I go to CES. I actually go to the startup zone because most of the startup guys don't have PR companies yet, and I can still get to that C-level contact at the company. Can you do this alone? I couldn't. Man, I'm a one-man show here, just like the rest of you. And I'm running this thing today. I did everything here for the podcast just by me. There's no staff here. It's Todd. All right. So can you do this alone? Probably not. So you're going to have to team up with some folks that do some like-minded content and go and attack it together. So in 2018, I had 3 podcast teams, and we had 11 people on the ground. We've had as many as 7 podcast teams, as high as like 30 people on the ground. But we found last year just 3 teams going and hitting different locations, hitting the stuff we want, really worked good. And what we did was I took interviews that the other team members did and put them on my website, and they took interviews I did and put them on their website. So we got cross-pollination of the content across multiple websites. And then each website, we all did our own individual write-ups for those blog posts so that they weren't a cut and paste. So that way Google SEO is a little bit different for each. A lot of work, yes, of course. But let me give you a little breakdown of last year's content. We did 147 interviews. those videos have received 41.5 million views. My event budget was about 15K to do that event. So yeah, I broke out the credit card, hotels, food, airfare, paying for the camera guy. You know, if you maybe have to take time off work, maybe that's lost wages at work. So my sponsorship return to date is about 68,000. Not a bad return. And it's actually a little bit more than that at this point. Because again, I initially prepared these slides in July. But what have I done at these events? Exposure for my show, built authority for me, engagement of my audience because they're getting a little bit different content than the regular podcast content. The results, sustainable show, listeners, a community. Rinse, repeat year after year, year after year. Go to a trade show, it's not hard. Get a press pass, build a team. Yearly progression. The yearly progression, when I went to some of these shows the first year, we walked around and we had no status. I started sending reports back to the organizers saying, hey, we put up 50 interviews. We got 20,000 listens on them. And then pretty soon they're saying, hey, we're going to give you a booth. Hey, now we're going to put you in the broadcast pavilion. And we took every opportunity. I was to the point of being annoying. If I saw someone with a mic cube interviewing someone and it was it didn't matter if it was, I didn't care who it was, and there was a camera involved, I waited till they got done the interview. I said, hey, are you looking to do any on-the-side interviews to pick up information about what people have seen at the show? I'm like, yeah. Boom. Next thing I know, I'm on national television, and I get 30 seconds in a pitch to say, hey, I'm here at this show. I've seen this, and by the way, my name is Todd Cochrane. Go to geeknewscentral.com. So this yearly progression of getting access, and you just have to put your foot in there and be aggressive, not to the point of being annoying, but I'm not afraid to say, hey, I'd love to be on. And they may have a spot they need to cover. So, well, do you know something about this? Yep. It doesn't matter if I don't know anything about it. I can make something up for 30 seconds. This feedback to trade show organizers, again, number of interviews. I give them a 91, 80, 270-day report. I give them to the come to market, follow-up interview links, social media mentions. We track all that, total views, total sales. If the client gives me sales numbers that are a direct response from the video, I provide that back to the trade show organizer because you're building value for the trade show attendees. Get you invited back. Okay, so again, I'm here at the end of this, but I just want to kind of reiterate what I did for, like, we talked about TV and radio. TV, you call the local television station and say, hey, I'm about ready to do my 100th episode of my podcast. I'm doing this podcast out of my studio. I'm here in the local community. I'd love to have you guys do a piece. And TV is always looking for fill. They're looking for a 2-minute fill. Sometimes I get on TV just by calling, saying, hey, I'm having this. There's something going on. It's special. Sometimes they'll ask me to come down. Sometimes they'll send someone here. Same thing with radio. I'm on the BBC call list. My phone will ring at 2 o'clock in the morning. I know it's the BBC because I have a special ringtone set to their telephone number. And they'll say, Todd, this is BBC Asia. Can you be on the air in 15 minutes talking about this? I'm like, talking about what? Yes, absolutely. I can be on the air. I'll be ready to go. Hang up, splash of water on my face, brush my teeth, shake myself off, come to the computer, load Google up, do a quick Google search for the topic that they want to talk about, and I get 2 minutes on BBC. But once you get your foot in the door to these places, and of course, what do I do at the end? The lady's, she's saying, hey, that was Todd Cochrane from Geek News Central at geeknewscentral.com. So 20 people heard it, or 100, or 1,000, or 1,000,000. You don't know. Doesn't matter. You take every opportunity that you can to put yourself out there. Again, it's all about building, results for this engagement. And again, I talked about, the blogging, talk about podcasts, talk about book, talk about trade shows, radio, TV, speaking. All right. So how does the speaking part work? Well, it won't be too long before you're being sought out. You become the authority. Someone's having a conference, and I'm not talking about Podcast Movement. I'm talking about some other conference in your subject matter, and they're looking for people to speak. If you're not applying to do a session at those events, you're missing out on an opportunity to build exposure and authority. You go to one of those events, you speak. Who knows? I have gotten more, how I have gotten national paid for honorarium type podcast. Honorarium type speaking gigs where I've done an event. Someone's come up and say, "Hi, I'm with so and so. We'd like to have you come out and talk to our company, or we'd like to come have you talk at our event, or we'd like to have you come keynote." Yeah, sometimes it's $500 an airfare in a cheap hotel room. Sometimes it's $5,000 first class ticket, 5-star accommodations. You never know, but you have to start small. Go to the Chamber of Commerce, go to the Lions Club, go wherever you can get your face in to speak. Do that. And again, connecting with companies. The only way, if you're doing a show that is only about people, then you're going to have to be creative there. But if you're doing a show that's talking about organizations, groups, and it ties in, making these connections with these companies is good, and going in and doing training events. I actually do podcast training events, podcast boot camps for companies that are not even a customer of Blubrry, but they pay me to come to do a 2 or 3 day event. I haven't done one of those in a couple of years. So I've been so busy. I basically turned away opportunities to go, and those are pretty lucrative cash-wise. So anyway, I spewed a lot here, and I'm sure there's going to be some questions. I'm way ahead of schedule here, Dave and Steve. Got through these things quick. Let me see what else. Do I have anything else? I'm sure I've jumped around a lot. Did what I say make sense, or did I piss everybody off? I'm looking through. Yeah, and it's true. What Blaze says, it says it takes money to make money. And so I tell you what happened the first year that we went to CES. It was Andy McCaskey and I. We went with Marant's little audio recorders. It was before we had anything that was cool like we have now. They were about this big, about that wide, took lots of batteries. And we doubled up in the hotel room. We ate as cheap as we could. Flew the cheap flights out to try to miss the airfare. Still a fair amount of money. And we did our podcast while we were in town, all that. And we kind of learned little by little. But we begged, borrowed, and stole we made sure we have money to go. And every year I budget now. I make a budget on how much I'm going to spend going to events and building my show. I'm at this 14 years, and I still invest in my show every single day. Sometimes now it's some social media stuff I'm also doing, and I didn't even talk about that, but you have to be able to, if you want your show to grow and you want to get to the point where you're going to have a show that's going to sustain, and if you have the goal to be able to become a full-time podcaster, then you're going to have to put the time in. If you're not, none of this matters. If you're having fun talking with your friend, this is therapy for you, putting out an episode every week, whatever it is your goal. That's the beauty about the podcasting space. You can do what you want. My motive here for you is to help you build from what you have to where you are. And if you're already an authority in your marketplace, then you got to work on building the engagement, right? Having the engagement come back. And engagement's more than, again, listener engagement. It's external engagement. It's not complicated, I don't think. And this is the last year I'm going to put this particular presentation forth. I've been talking about this stuff for a couple of years. And so you guys are the last ones that are going to get this. I'm not doing a version 3 of this thing. I've got more things I want to promote. But I can't stress enough that if you're not doing the grind, doing the shows, in my opinion, is the fun part. The rest of the stuff sucks. I spend probably 3 times as much time doing promotion, social media, working, contacting the clients. All of it is, again, is around the goal of building exposure, authority, and engagement. Because you can become, see, I'm 14 years in space. So I'm the old guy. And I'm supposedly the person that you can't teach old dog new tricks, right? So you have to keep reinventing yourself. So for me, about every 2 years, I really look at the thing real close and say, what can I change? How can I make a changeover to stay relevant and continue to build? Because what will happen is with audiences, I've been in the space long enough that audiences come and go. I've had listeners leave the show and come back 3 or 4 times over the 14-year period. And no one's going to stay with you. Very few people are going to stay with you for your entire time. Because quite frankly, what happens, they get sick of hearing your voice. Only your P1s, those ones that are super fans, they're gonna forgive your Toddisms, which is for those of you who don't know, I have a tendency to absolutely destroy the English vocabulary and mispronounce words all the time. So some people are going to get sick of hearing the Toddisms, or it just goes the full gambit. So just remember, people are going to leave and they're going to come back. But those that leave, you got to keep feeding new ones in, right? So how do you keep feeding new ones in? You just can't keep doing the same thing. You have to diversify. And some of you may not have the budget for this. So start small or ask. Sometimes trade shows will actually have a few people they'll pay to come. You'll ask, do you have any type of scholarship program? And apply for their scholarship, and they'll pay for the hotel. They'll pay for the, for your food, and almost like an ambassadorship type thing to go to an event. So there's lots of ways to make it happen. And the worst thing that can happen is say, no, we don't have nothing like that. But you may set a spark in their mind saying, maybe we should. And maybe the next year they'll contact and say, hey, by the way, we knew last year you're interested in scholarship. We didn't have one, but we do have one this year. We like your idea. What can you do for us? So when you go to a group and ask for a scholarship, be sponsored to go to an event, tell them what you're going to provide. Lay out what you're going to do. If they have 300 vendors, say, okay, I'm going to interview 30 vendors at least and do an incomprehensive interview. We'll put them up on the website, 10%, 20%, whatever that number is. I found that when you go to an event, if you're lucky, if it's a big event, if you're lucky, you can get 20 interviews a day. Like a big event like CES, I might be able to get 30, but I'm going to tell you, we really been rocking it that day. But, 10 or 12, but over a 3 or 4 day event, that's 30 or 40. So it is possible, but you have to have the right type of expectations going in and don't overpromise on any type of event. Blake says, Todd, I know you mentioned you feel blogging is essential, but what do you do if you aren't at that stage yet that can't make this a full-time thing? Okay, so here's what I'm going to say to that. Let me lead the rest of his questions. I completely understand how it's doable if you're doing this full-time, but with a full-time job and a family, still time is limited. So do you just pick your battles more until you can afford more time? No. You grind. So let me talk about the early days of podcasting. For me, I didn't have money to pay bloggers. I was working sometimes a minimum of 12 hours a day doing my Navy job. I was coming home and, of course, had to take care of the kids, family, whatever chores that was going around here. I was doing 2 podcasts a week. And then I was blogging on top of that, sometimes 3 to 5 articles a week. I just didn't sleep. I put the time in. And believe me, You just have to put the time in. If you want it bad enough. Now, don't get divorced over it, all right? Don't have the wife coming in or the significant other look at you. What are you doing? Make sure you meet those family obligations, but you got to sneak time to do this. Does that mean waking up an hour earlier? Okay, I wake up today, 4:45 a.m. is my wake up time. 4:45 a.m. I rarely go to bed before 10. It takes commitment to be able to do this and put the grind in when you don't have the financial resources to help people do it. Now, I have a confession to make. I haven't been blogging a lot for the past 2 or 3 years, but I made a commitment just about 2 weeks ago to do so again. And I'm back in doing the grind, putting my voice back on the blog. And why? Well, we need to have some of my own medicine here to do that. Slow and steady. Slow and steady is the key here. This Rome wasn't built in a day. This podcast of mine. Okay, so let's look at sponsorship dollars. So, and where am I at on time? I'm okay. So, I don't think I've told this many times. So, when GoDaddy came to me in June of 05 and said, "Hey, we want to sponsor your show," I said, I had no clue. No, and at the time we had some rudimentary statistics. I thought my show was about 45,000, but probably after filtering, which wasn't in existence then, it was probably closer to 20. So if you factor that in, they came to me and I thought I had 45,000 listeners. I thought I was big kid on the block. And they said, "How much?" I said, "Well, how's $300 sound?" I had no idea what the sponsorship level should be. And they were, "Oh, great." Sent me the contract. I signed it. I did 8 ads for them. And they called me and they said, "Hey, we want to renew for a year." And I'm like, "How'd we do?" "So you brought us 367 new customers." I was like, "Huh?" And I said, "I call you back." And I went back and did the math. And a couple hours later, I called Chris back. I said, "Hey, here's the number I'm thinking about." And when you're buying a car, have you ever quoted a number and the salesman says yes too quickly and you say, you should have went another 1,000 lower? Well, I probably should have went another 1,000 higher. And because she said yes that quick. Well, that was the number I came up with. So in the early days of podcasting, there wasn't a lot of budget for me to do any of this stuff. Yeah, I was making some money with the advertising dollars, but at the same time, there was no Libsyn, there was no Blubrry, there was no one. I had 15 different web servers I had to pay for to keep the show online. So it really cost money to do that. And I was also under a 2-year deadline with my wife to make some money for the show. So little by little, and I didn't hire writers until maybe 5 years ago. So the amount of money the show was making wasn't a lot in the early days. I don't outsource. Yeah, you can outsource blogging. And that's what I have a trusted family of writers, but they all came from my show. There's not a single writer on Geek News Central that wasn't a fan of the podcast first. So that's how I got. And yeah, maybe you're going to get a few people who will volunteer, and you should use the resources of your audience if they're willing to help. I have one fan that does nothing but sends me album art. I think I've got 90 pieces of album art from him, and I use those in rotation. But again, I guess, it was summed up in the chat here earlier, slow and steady. And, and what I did, and just so everybody knows, is when I started the podcast in October 2004, I had a military retirement date of December 31st, 2016. So essentially January 1st of 2007, I was going to be retired from the Navy. And about a year into doing the show, I said, there is potential here to do this full time. And I set that as a goal, 2 years to go full time as a podcaster. And it was tight. My wife was absolutely freaked out about it. To be honest with you, she still is. And we've been at it 14 years. She's still freaked out. She doesn't understand how it works. But been able to make it work. But again, uh, 18-hour days, friends. It was not, we're not talking, when you're working for yourself, you think working for your 9 to 5 is hard. If you start working for yourself, you're going to put in 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. And it does take a grind on you. So you have to do some balance here. But, and if you're not at that point, again, if your show hasn't grown to the point where financially you can make that flip, so let's say you invest an hour a day into the show that's not podcast recording time. I think you'll get a long ways in a pretty big hurry because it adds up. So again, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's a marathon, and it takes time. And we're in a society now where we all want it now. Give it to me, and we can't do that. It's just not possible. Um, for the majority of us. Again, because the majority of us don't, if you are a celebrity or you have a name or you have a network already, beautiful. But the majority of us are independent content creators doing this out of our closets of our garage or out of our spare bedroom. Um, so it is possible to do all these things, but I started with a $14.95 LabTech headset in a little hotel room in Waco, Texas, and recorded my first 3 episodes playing AC/DC as the intro music. Those episodes are no longer in existence. So we all start at the bottom, and we have to work our way up in building our audience. And it just depends on how much time you want to put in. My formula is there's 100 ways to build a show. Mine's just one way that I work for me. Hope it works for you. But I think if we go back to these 3 words, no matter what you do, building exposure, building authority, building engagement, if you can do those 3 things in whichever way you want to do that, I think, or whatever method you use to get from point A to point B, I think you're going to have success with your show. And what is success? It's whatever you think is success. Doesn't matter what Todd says it is. Doesn't matter if you have 50,000 listeners or 100,000 or 200 or 5. Whatever you feel happy with the success of your show, that's the important thing. For me, I do the show because it's fun. I have a good time doing it. Yeah, sometimes it's like, oh man, I gotta do a show. The new media show, I wake up on a Saturday. I wake up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday to do a show. Starts at 6 a.m. Hawaiian Standard Time on a Saturday. I haven't had a Saturday sleep in 5 years. So why did I do it at 6 a.m.? Because my kids have soccer, band, everything else. And by 7:30 or 8, I'm usually in the car taking them somewhere for something. So that was the only time I could fit that show into the lifestyle without pissing the wife off. So anyway, the key to making connections is not hard. The key to making connection, and now let's be frank. I run a podcasting company, and I'm almost out of time. But my show is my show. The audience of my show could care less about Blubrry. It has to stand on its own. So the only way that I have built that show is by being aggressive and saying, hey, can I do an interview? Hey, by the way, MSNBC, that studio's empty for 2 hours. Can I use it for an hour to do a live show on your studio? Do you need to use our union cameraman? No, I'm bringing my own camera. No one's ever asked this before. Sure, come on up. You can have it an hour a day. MSNBC saw us do an hour a day and said, holy cow, these guys knocked out 13 interviews in an hour and we couldn't get one done in 5 takes. Next thing I know, hey, Todd, would you like to have a broadcast location in here? We'll give you a 10 by 20 area. We'll give you electricity. We'll give you the internet. We'll give you security. Would you come and do live with us? Gulp. Yes. Sometimes you just got to ask. All right. I'm at 55 minutes. Dave, I think I'm over.
Hey Todd, no, you're right on time actually. Yeah, there's been a lot going
Oh,
on in the
hang on, hang
chat.
on. I got to switch to the other headset. Duh.
Yeah, there's a
All
lot
right,
going on in the. Oh,
I can hear you now. Sorry.
okay. No problem. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the chat. And like you said, what's gonna work for one person or one show, one podcast, one business is not gonna be the same. These are just actionable items that we can take back. I can say for myself, I received 2 emails the last week that said, "Hey Dave, are you going to be visiting our conference again in October that you attended last year? We appreciated the podcast interviews you got." And that's an establishment of a connection that can help grow that audience. You're reaching a particular brand of your listeners. So there's so many things you can take away here, that you can actually implement today. And yeah, if your lifestyle doesn't work for it, find a way to fit it in, grind it out, do what you have to. So there's a lot of different caveats in the podcasting space, and that's kind of the like you said, there's no one way right way of doing it, but there are ways that you can fit things into what you're doing.
Not having to sleep helps.
That's true. That's true. Well, Todd, as always, I want to thank you and Blubrry and the entire team and the Podcast Awards for their support of International Podcast Day. You've been, 3 years running as our platinum sponsor here for the event. We always appreciate everything that you do, your staff and your team do, and of course, sharing your knowledge with the podcasting space. So we appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure, and thanks for the work you and the whole International Podcast Day team does as well. I know it's a grind and a few hours left, so power on, and I'm looking forward to the next session.
Awesome. All right. Well, happy International Podcast Day, everybody. Thank you.